Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Max here, and today we are going to be building a 3D game with JavaScript and Kaboom JS on Replit. This will be a great introduction to the basic concepts of 3D games in general, as well as a good intro to game development and the Kaboom JS framework. It's going to be super fun and interesting, so I hope you're super excited to start building this 3D game. Cool, so before we get started, you guys can just head over to this initial text-based tutorial. I have put a link in the description of the video for this, so you can basically just copy along and copy and paste along with me, or you can pause the video and just copy the code out like that. Either way should be fine. So definitely check this out. There are some very cool concepts here that you can check out with a visual diagram aid, which will help you to understand the concepts a bit more. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start coding the game. So you can head over to replit.com and create a new REPL and search for Kaboom over here to load the Kaboom JS template. You can call this whatever you want. I'll call this 3D shooter game, just like that, and create the REPL. So once your REPL is created, it should bring up your Replit IDE for you. And I'll just zoom in a little bit over here, and we can take away all this boilerplate stuff over there. We still will want the context, but we want to pass in a couple of additional values over here. So in order to put those in, you can open up the call to Kaboom as an object, and you can put these values in here. So we're initializing our Kaboom context with a simple background, a certain width and height, and we're saying we want the scale basically to be double what it usually would. Next thing you're going to want to do is load up your sounds and sprites folders, and you can get those from the original text-based tutorial that I showed you a little bit earlier. You can just grab the zip file that contains the sound and the sprites folders and just paste them in and replace the stock ones on the left over there. And I can say over here, load sprites and sounds. And we're just going to be using the load root and load sprite and load sound methods to load all of our sprites and sounds for our game. Once you've got those loaded, we can go ahead and create the layers for our game. So I'll just say create layers over here, and you can see we just call the layers method, and we specify the background layer, the object layer, the UI layer, and by default the layer which will be the default layer is the object layer. Right, so now we have pretty much taken care of the setup that we have to do. We've got our Kaboom context with our custom properties in there. We are loading our sprites and sounds, and we've created the layers for our game. So the first step to our game would be to add some aliens, right? So if you look at the code over here, we've got an empty array for aliens. We've got a function called spawn alien, and basically inside this function we're doing exactly that. We're spawning an alien at a random position that is calculated using certain constant variables that we have declared up here. And we're using the add method from Kaboom to add a new alien. We are using our alien sprite to obviously render the alien sprite, and we want to push on the new alien which is being added onto the screen into our aliens array every time we run this spawn alien function. And we're using the loop method over here to obviously loop the function to call it multiple times, so we should spawn bunch of aliens across the screen if we run this code. So let's check that out. Let's run our project. And you can see that we have little aliens spawning in random positions. Of course they aren't moving or anything yet, but that is a pretty cool start. So before we worry about actually making our aliens move, I'll just encourage you guys to check out on the original text-based tutorial. It has a nice explanation here of how we make the illusion of 3D essentially. So instead of just an X and Y axes like we would have in a 2D game, we've actually got an additional Z axis, which is going through the center as well. So you can see in the middle here we've got 0 for our center, and then obviously on our X, Y, and Z axes we can move our aliens or anything else we put in the game essentially across these axes, and that will give a nice cool 3D illusion basically. Right, so we're back over at our code and we do have our aliens spawning nicely across the screen with our loop over here, but in order to make this game conform a little bit more to how you would usually make one of these games with Kaboom JS, I think we'd want to create a scene or a main scene for our game. And a scene is basically just a group of logic or a level basically in your game that you can go to at any point. And to create a scene, you can just say scene like this, open that up, and we can call this main and pass in an arrow function, right? So what we're going to do is put the spawn alien logic inside our main scene. So we can move that up into our main scene. And it won't work at the moment because we have not gone to our main scene, and in order to go to the main scene we can just say go main, just like that. And you can see that our aliens are spawning again. Cool. So now we can worry about actually having these aliens move around the screen. So I can say over here alien movement, and make sure you put this in your main scene, of course. So if you look at the code over here, we've got an onUpdate function. So the onUpdate function will run every frame of your game essentially. So all the logic in here is going to happen every frame, and we're basically using the Z position of the alien. So remember, the Z axis will go sort of diagonally across the screen, and we are basically subtracting a little bit from that and using the DT method over here to get the time between each frame to multiply that by the alien speed. So it's going to basically create a bit of an illusion of the aliens coming down the screen on that Z axis over there, and then of course we use the X and Y axes as well to say that we want the aliens to move just a little bit down those axes, and it's basically going to create the illusion of the aliens moving towards the center of the screen, and of course they're going to grow as well. So that's what's going to make the aliens seem like they're coming straight towards you. Then we're saying if the Z position of the alien reaches 1, which is going to be basically right in the center of the screen, then we want to destroy that alien. So our aliens should now be flying into the screen. So let's give this a try. And you can see now that the aliens are coming straight towards you. Awesome. Alright, so what we're going to do now is pretty cool. We're going to essentially create a moving star background custom with Kaboom JS. So I'm just going to say over here, moving star background, and if you look at this code over here, we've got some constants. We've got a tracker constant to keep track of how many stars we want to spawn, which is currently at 1,000. We've got a constant for our star speed, and we have an array of stars which we're going to push onto inside this spawn stars function that we have here, which uses a loop, which is using our star count variable over here, which is currently 1,000. So it will loop 1,000 times to create 1,000 stars, and inside that loop we are setting a new star object with an X, Y, and Z position, and we are pushing that star into our stars array. Then we are running the spawn stars function right here, as well as a new onUpdate event, which runs every frame if you remember. So basically this on update, we are going to get the X and Y center coordinates again. And we're using a for each on the stars array to, for every star, subtract our star speed for that star's Z position, right? So much like we did with the aliens, this is going to create the illusion of the stars moving through space. So we subtract the star speed value from our Z position of each star, and if the star reaches 1, which is the center, then we want to reset that back to 1000, which will basically be on the end of the screen. So we are using the draw rect method to create each little star with a height and width of 1. It's basically just a little white block essentially. We are adding a width and height check in here for X and Y, of course, so we don't want to always spawn stars. And we've got this intensity variable over here to basically track the Z axes of each individual star. And basically we are saying that the further away the star would be, if you look over here, when we draw the star, we're using the color property to use that intensity, which will change based on the Z axis of the star, and that is going to basically give the illusion of the stars getting brighter or softer, essentially. So the stars will get brighter as they move towards the screen. So let's have a look at this in action. And you can see that now we are flying through space with aliens coming towards us. Awesome. Now that we are at this stage of the game, I think we can quickly add our player cockpit in. So I'll say player cockpit just like this, and we can simply add our sprite with the add method, and we are using a specific position, which is using our constants. We're adding it to the UI layer, of course, and we want the origin to be from the center of that sprite, right? So if we rotate or move the sprite at all, we'll use the center as the origin, and we just want to scale it down a little bit. So if we save that, we should be able to see our cockpit of our ship. Now, of course, we want to be able to move our spaceship around, and in order to achieve this, we're going to be using a couple of helper functions. So I'll just say movement or player movement helper functions, right? So we're going to have two of them over here. We've got a shift aliens function and a shift stars function, and they're both going to do exactly that. They're going to shift either the aliens or the stars on the screen left or right, depending on which direction we steer our ship in, okay? So you can see in here we've got an X and Y for each of these functions, and that obviously represents X and Y axes for aliens and stars. And we're just using a for each on the aliens and the stars, and we are altering the X and Y positions just a little bit. So in order to use these functions, we're actually going to be using our key bindings for our spaceship for left and right. So let's go ahead and do that. So right over here, I'll say player movement. So if you have a look over here, we have a constant called move delta, which is initially set to 2000, which is basically just representing how much we want the player movement to happen each second, right? So we're using a bunch of on key downs here. We're listening for left, right, up, and down. And for each instance of one of these key presses, what we want to do is use our move delta to multiply that by the DT method, which gets the time between each frame to determine how much we want to move. Then, depending on which key is pressed, we want to both use our shift aliens and our shift stars functions to do exactly that. It's going to shift the aliens and the stars left or right to create the illusion of the ship moving, essentially. So that's pretty much that. So if we run our project again, you can see that now we can steer our ship through space. And over here, we've also got these on-key release methods, which basically listen for once the key of left and right is released. We want to set our camera position back to 0, right? So that gives us the illusion of spaceship moving. So now, of course, we need a way to shoot these aliens that are coming towards us in our spaceship, and we are going to need a way to aim to kill them, of course. So I'm going to say over here, crosshair, and basically we're just going to use the add method to add a vertical and a horizontal crosshair to make one in the middle of the screen. It's just a custom rectangle, basically setting the position to be in the center of the screen, and we're adding it to the UI layer. So if we run this, we should be able to see our crosshair in the middle of the screen, just like that. Now, in order for us to actually shoot some lasers, we're going to need a helper function for that. So I'm going to say shooting helper function, and it's going to be called spawn bullet. So you can see over here, I just want to use the formatter quickly, and let's make this a little bit more readable. Cool, so we've got a function called spawn bullet, and we have a constant for bullet speed equal to 10 by default. We have values for the left origin of the bullet as well as the right, as well as the bullet vanishing point, which is going to be sort of in the distance. And we're using the vec2 method to get coordinates on the screen for x and y basically, and we're using our screen width and screen height to calculate where our left and right origins for the bullets are. Then we actually add the bullets over here with the add method. We give it the tag of bullet, of course, and we've got some custom properties in here for bullet speed, as well as our target position, which is going to be set to our bullet vanishing point over here. And we've got two of them basically, one for left and one for right. So we're going to have two lasers shooting from the left and from the right. And we want to play our cool laser shooting sound. So that is our spawn bullet function. So let's go ahead and try to use that. So just below our spawn bullet function over here, I'll just say shooting keybinds, right? So we're using an onUpdate here, and there's some pretty complex maths going on here to basically calculate how our bullets fly through the screen. So I'll encourage you guys to check out the text-based tutorial here. They have a pretty good rundown on how the math works here, if you are interested in exactly how it works. Otherwise, you can simply paste the function in, and it basically checks if the bullets that have been fired through the certain axes, X and Y, if it reaches a certain position, which is the vanishing point, or on the Y line, then we're going to destroy that bullet. And we also use the on key down on a space, of course, to call our spawn bullet function. So let's just have a look at this. Try hit the space bar. So we can now fly around and we can shoot our lasers. Nice. So now that we are able to shoot, we have to check for collision between our bullets and the aliens that are flying towards us. So I'll say bullet collision detection, right? Let's try to format that a little bit. Right, so if we take a look here, we're using the onCollide method. We're checking the alien tag against the bullet tag, passing those in as an arrow function, and we're saying if the Y position of the bullet is greater than the screen height times 0.33 plus our bullet slack variable, which we set over here to 10, which is basically going to determine if the bullets have reached the point of our crosshair, which is obviously in the center of the screen. So if that is the case, we just want to return, which would mean that nothing would happen basically. The bullets would just fire straight into space. So in the case that a bullet does collide with an alien, we're going to use this make explosion function, which we're going to create in a second, and we of course want to destroy that alien and that bullet. So hopefully that makes sense, and let's go ahead and create that make explosion function so that it works. So here is the make explosion function. I'll just say make explosion. So we did use this same make explosion function in the 2D space shooter tutorial, if you've checked that out. So I don't want to go into too much detail here. You can definitely check out that tutorial if you want an in-depth explanation, but essentially it's a make explosion function with a bunch of values, and it's using a loop to make some explosions, and these lifespan and grow functions are just helper functions for that. So now that we have our bullet collision detection as well as our make explosions, we should be able to shoot our aliens and make them explode. So let's test it out. Flying around. Boom. So we can now kill our aliens. So the final thing we would need to worry about is, you can see that the aliens are just flying straight into the spaceship and disappearing. So we want them to basically explode if they hit the spaceship. So over here we're going to create a strike zone variable which has X and Y coordinates, 2 of each to be specific, and they basically just represent the area of the ship, and we're going to use these inside our check over here where we are checking the position of the alien to destroy it, and we're just going to alter this a little bit to check for collision of the spaceship. So instead of less than or equal to 1 for the Z position of the alien, we're just going to say as long as it's less than 1, just to give it a little bit more room to breathe there. And we're going to alter this check a little bit, and I just want to format this. So we're going to check if the alien has hit the craft, and we're saying basically if the position of the alien hits any of the strike zones, which we are representing over here with this constant, then we're going to shake the screen a little. We're going to shake the screen just a little bit, and we're going to use our awesome make explosion function, and of course destroy the alien that hits the ship. Now before we finally test this out, something you might want to do to make your explosion more realistic is to add the sound for the explosion. So you can just plop that into your make explosion function. We're just going to play the explosion sound and just lower the volume just a little bit. So let's test out our game. Right, so we can fly around, our aliens are coming. And we can kill our aliens, and if they hit our spaceship, bang, they explode. Awesome. So that's going to do it for this 3D game tutorial. I hope you guys really enjoyed it and learned something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.